anname sõna professor Margaret
topic. Now I would like to give a word over to Professor Margaret M. who is the director of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Health Promotion and Research at the National University of Ireland in Galway. In addition, she is a lecturer at other universities as well. She has published a lot of literature on the subject, and she will be talking about what works in promoting the mental health and well-being of children and youth today. And as soon as our computer warms up again, we can also pull up her presentation and go on with that. After the presentation, you have a moment to ask questions, so do take that time and use it.
Good morning, everybody. My thanks to the conference organizers for inviting me to speak at this event, and I'm very pleased to be back in Tallinn. This is my second visit to Estonia. I have lots of technical things here, so I hope I don't mess up between all of the equipment. I have been asked to give you an overview this morning of what works in promoting the mental health and well-being of children and youth. And I want to touch upon many of the issues that may come up later in the course of today's presentations. So maybe just to start in terms of what works, I think it's very important to be, when we talk about promoting the mental health and well-being of children, what exactly are we talking about? And I can see here that over the last 25 years, there has been a growing recognition of the importance of promoting good mental health for children and young people, and ensuring that they develop the social and emotional skills that are needed for life. And that these are a key asset and a resource for positive youth development. We also know that the early years lay the foundations for good mental health across the life cycle. And when we talk about promoting good mental health, we ask the question, where is mental health created? It is not created in hospitals, in clinics. It's created where we live our lives, in our homes, in our schools, in our communities. So that is where the focus of activity needs to be in terms of promoting good mental health. So it is essentially, we're broadening our concept and understanding of what good mental health is about and how it can be promoted. When we look at the definitions of mental health, such as that provided by WHO, it has a very firm focus on a positive concept. It's about social and emotional well-being, and it's about a resource that enables us to manage our lives successfully. None of us could engage with our everyday activities without good mental health. It's really critical. But it's also about surviving stresses, overcoming disappointment and sadness, because that is part of life. And it's the skills to enable us to do that. We have seen a lot more focus on defining positive mental health in recent years. It is more than the absence of mental ill health. That's quite important. We're talking about something more. And I think the work of people like Corey Keyes in the US, of Felicia Huppert in the UK, and Carl Riff and colleagues in positive psychology have played an important role in building up the literature and our understanding about what this positive concept means in terms of subjective well-being, but also positive functioning and engagement socially. And I think Corey Key's concept of flourishing, not sure what that translates into in your own languages, but in English, flourishing is something all of us want to do, and particularly we want our children to do. And I think that really captures the essence of this kind of holistic development. We also know that the promotion of good mental health, that it leads to lasting benefits for improved health and social functioning for children, for their parents, and for society generally. And I'm pleased to say that we have a very strong body of international evidence now that there are interventions that can enhance good mental health and can promote good mental health for children and young people. And the evidence tells us that not only does this reduce their risks for mental health problems, it enhances their ability for good mental and physical health, but it also leads to very positive outcomes in terms of education and academic achievement, their readiness for employment, and their social well-being as adults. So these lasting positive outcomes are really important. There was an interesting report produced by WHO and the Gulbenkian Foundation in just last December, which looked at the social determinants of mental health. And they are important because you can potentially modify social determinants. And it looks at the fact that our mental health is shaped to a great extent, not only by what's going on inside our heads and our psychology, but our social, economic, and our physical environments in which we live. So if we want to improve mental health, we need to improve the actions the conditions of daily life. The houses people live in, the issue of poverty, which the minister referred to, those day-to-day experiences. So this is really, when we say the title of the conference is a shared responsibility, this is very much the focus of a mental health in all policies approach. That it's whole of government have a role to play, as indeed do whole of society. It is not just an issue for, certainly not for mental health professionals alone. And we need to have actions that are of universal relevance. We all have mental health promotion needs. I certainly do, I'm sure you do, that enable us to kind of to engage and to flourish in terms of our daily lives, and to just sometimes just cope and get by, which is also important. So we need policy making at all levels of governance and across sectors in order to make this very positive difference for mental health. When we look at these models of mental health promotion, they operate at a number of levels. Yes, they are about strengthening individuals and families and providing them with the skills that are needed in terms of life skills and gaining a sense of control over one's life. But it's also about strengthening communities, a sense of connectedness and belonging in terms of our social inclusion. It's also about reorienting our health services. That yes, they are concerned with treatment and with rehabilitation, but they also need to be concerned with prevention and with promoting good health. How do we keep people healthy? And the final thing, very importantly, and this is where the all-of-government approach comes in, that we need to remove those structural barriers to good mental health at a societal level, be that in terms of our culture, be it in terms of our economic and social policies, levels of income, employment, access to social support services. So when we apply a health promotion model to promoting mental health, this is what it looks like. You look at the ecology where people live their lives. So we look at the child. Maybe I should use my pointer here. We look at the child in the context of the family, in the context of the community in which they live, in the context of the broader environment and the policies that shape that environment. And in health promotion, we say to have a lasting, really, impact, you need actions at each of these levels. And they need to be integrated to work together. When you get that, you will increase people's control and you will get sustainable change. So where does this sit in our traditional health services? So our services are usually concerned with the issue of treatment, identifying when there are problems, when treatment is needed, and with rehabilitation. But we also need, we also need to have a focus on prevention before problems become intractable, early intervention. And here, this section, when people are well, how do we maintain good mental health? Have we supportive environments? How can we empower people, increase our resilience? Because that is really the crucial element. This is the big section of the population. So this is a kind of model of mental health promotion that I would put to you this morning. So what I'm saying is that we work across sectors to implement mental health promotion action, to ensure that children and families have access to supportive relationships, to education, employment, housing, all of the fundamentals, and that we address issues of social inequity, poverty, stigma and discrimination, which deny people those life opportunities and damage their mental health. So it is indeed a shared responsibility across all of government, and that means we need to unlock the potential in other sectors. All of these sectors, education, employment, media, the financial business sector, all of these have a crucial role to play in creating an environment that will support and promote good mental health. And I think we haven't fully harnessed that. And that is very much the current focus on a mental health in all policies approach. And just 2 weeks ago, I went to a conference in Helsinki, a European Commission conference, which the focus was on this very issue, how we can achieve this. Okay, so that's outlining the kind of model. I want to look now at, well, what works? If we've got the model and we've got the concept, where do we start? And here we need to look at the evidence. What is effective? What is cost effective? And we have quite a lot of research reviews, systematic reviews and databases that have brought that evidence together. We're in a much better position than we were 20 years ago. We need to know, who does it work for? Does it work for all children, all families, particularly those who are most vulnerable and those who are hardest to reach? And that's really, do we bridge the inequity gap? We also need to know, how do these interventions work? That's very important. What is needed to put the intervention into practice? What skills are needed? What training is required? What organizational capacity and support is needed? And we also need to know, in what context do these interventions work? We are fortunate to have a lot of good examples which come primarily from North America, from Australia, and some from Northern Europe. Will they transfer? Will they work in our local region? And we need to know that. So that is that issue of, and when we take it out from the research conditions, will they work in the messiness of everyday life? That's really important in terms of making the evidence work in practice. We recently conducted a review for the UK government, and of course, that is not our government. I am Irish, but this is the UK government, commissioned us to undertake a review of the evidence on the effectiveness of both school-based programmes and out-of-school programmes. And in that, we looked at a lot of the international interventions that are being implemented across the UK. And so I'm going to draw some findings from that report. Also, I'm going to draw on a recent review which we did for WHO, and this concerned the implementation of the Global Mental Health Action Plan. And they wanted to look at this particularly in the Eastern Mediterranean region, which is quite an interesting region because you have very high-income countries and you have very low-income countries. So what would work across those different resource settings? So this was for a briefing for ministers of health across these different countries. So we really had to condense this down and saying, if you're going to prioritise action, where are you going to focus your activities? I'll also draw on some earlier work, reviews that we did, and the original book I did with Rachel Jenkins, which one of these days I will update, because I think there is so much work that has happened in the last 7 years since we published this, and that's a good thing to be able to say. We know a lot more, there's a lot more research, a lot more activity that we can pull out there. So what to focus on? When we looked across this body of work, I would say there are 3 top-line sort of areas to prioritise. We need to start at the beginning, so starting with early childhood interventions in terms of pregnancy, antenatal care, following through postnatal care the first 2 to 3 years of life. You know, if you start there, the idea is to give every child a good start. And that is looking at, we have parenting support programs, and I don't know if you have in Estonia home visiting, where the nurses go into the homes of the new mothers. And here, what they do is they integrate into this a focus on social and emotional development of the child and the mother, alongside the child's physical and cognitive development. So you're looking at the full suite and empowering parents and enhancing their well-being. These have a very strong impact. The second area, then moving on, is preschool education. And again, this is looking at, traditionally, preschools have prepared children to be ready for school. Also including here a focus on social and emotional skill development for the children as part of their core development. And then moving to school-based approaches. So we're moving, as you see, through the years. You're coming up into age primary, post-primary, which would take you right up to 18, 19 years of age. Embedding social and emotional learning as a core part of the school mission and the curriculum. So that you are inserting that for all the children that go through the school system. And I would maybe talk a little bit about example. And I know that detail of this will be gone into in some of the later presentations. When we look across these various effective interventions, looking at the literature, those that really are successful have a very structured approach. They have well-defined goals, and they're underpinned by a strong theory of what makes them work. So be that in terms of attachment or building self-confidence. So that is a very important aspect of these successful programs. They also tend to build on strengths. They're not pointing out what's going wrong. They are they're enhancing competence. That is very important. So they're empowering young people. They're not just about conveying knowledge, because, you know, telling what we should be doing, that doesn't really work. They are focused on skill development. What are the skills? What are the very practical things in the context of everyday life that will make the difference? Most of these successful programs have a very clear focus on implementation, and that means ensuring that there are clear guidelines for whoever is implementing it, be it the family nurse, be it the teacher, be it the community worker, about what is to be done, how it's to be done, what training they're required to do it, and that there are supportive structures in place to make that work. You cannot overlook that part. That is really, really important, the implementation piece. And we know that the earlier you start, the more impact you have, be that in terms of following prenatally, and that it has to be of a certain intensity. You know, the one-off short intervention does not usually create lasting change. It has to address the social context, meaning that you have to involve parents, families, in the context of their local community and address what their social situation is. And that means that there needs to be organisational and system-level practices and policies in place to support these initiatives to work. So if you want sustainable change, you've got to bring it in at all of those levels. So I'm just going to kind of go through a few sample programs just to give you an idea. I think I have about 10 minutes left, yeah? Okay. Now, I've just brought up some examples. These were some of the original leading programs that kind of led the way, and that they have been taken up subsequently and are now really being mainstreamed into standard service. If we take these home visiting programs, some of the original ones looked at teenage mothers who were at high risk, providing very intensive support prenatally then following them up and keeping that support going for the first 2 years of the baby's life. And focusing, as I said, bringing in not just on the physical development and safety of the child, which of course is hugely important, but also around that the element of bonding, attachment, the emotional and social development of both the mother and the child. There have been major studies done in the US, for example, from the OLS program, which has been around, I think, probably one of the longest. Big randomized controlled trials that have followed up the children from those studies up to when they are young, their adolescence. And there you can see some of the impressive outcomes. They reduce the risk of child abuse. They reduce the risk of substance misuse, alcohol and smoking. They also reduce the risk of criminal activity for both the child and the mother, because these are a high-risk group. And so I think that is really important, because if the good social and emotional skills are there, they're important across the area in terms of smoking, alcohol. I know the minister talked about that in terms of levels of smoking reducing, but also in terms of sexual health, they're important. So that is, if you promote those, you get a good spiraling effect, and that is really important. So the issue is, can we afford these kind of programs? That's great, looks good, can we afford it? So they have done some economic analysis of this, and this is going back to the original program. And here they say that the investment in the program is recovered by the child's 4th birthday. You get 4 times the return by the time the child is 15, and then the long-term estimates are now you get up to $23,000 for every dollar invested. And the reason that is because you have a reduced need for criminal services, for various other services that are required. So this is a good, solid investment. It has been replicated in the US and in many countries around the world. In England, for example, it is now being mainstreamed into the delivery of the family nurses. And they're beginning to kind of research that, to look at the impact that that has, that particular model. And I'm pleased to say, when we review the literature recently, there are some very good examples also from low-income countries working with children living in the poorest of conditions, that this can be integrated into the care that is given to new mothers at a low cost. And that's really important, that it's really feasible. Going to the preschool, there are a number of examples of where the long-term benefits of preschool education for young children, particularly, again, those who are most vulnerable, who are living in poverty. We have a number of systematic reviews showing the effect. Again, the classic study here from the US was the high-scope peri-preschool program a number of years ago. I mention it because it's one of the studies that have followed those children from the ages of 3 up to 45 years of age. So we don't have too many pieces of research that have done that. And this model is a very particular educational model. It's very active learning, engaging the parents very, very much in terms of the education of the child. And it looks at, yes, their intellectual development, but also their emotional and social development. The effects are that when you look at these children as adults, they've done better in school, they have better grades, they've completed school. And these are children who were from very poor backgrounds, whose future did not look so good if you were to predict it when they were 3 or 4. They're doing better in terms of employment, better earnings, more likely to be married themselves. In other words, they're just all round doing better. So these are kind of flourishing as opposed to sort of, you know, the trajectory that you would have expected. And again, the cost-benefit analysis suggests that there is a very good return on what you spend on these programs. And of course, the politicians are always interested. They want to know this, and we all need to, this is our taxpayers' money. We all need to know that there is a good return for these programs. Then coming to the schools. And here, I think there has been a lot of activity in this area recently, and that's really good, and that there's a focus on social and emotional learning and skills development within the educational system. So building academic success on social and emotional development, because if children are not emotionally present in the classroom, they cannot learn. And so it's saying building that in. And it has an impact on reducing school dropout and also reducing negative health and social outcomes. And some of the kind of, when we say, what are we talking about? What kind of social and emotional skills? So CASEL have looked at this and have looked at the key skills that are needed. Greater awareness of one's own strengths, one's own feelings, how to manage emotions, regulate situations, solve problems creatively. If you can do that, children don't need to bully. They don't need to be aggressive if they can do that. Showing empathy, appreciating diversity, having tolerance, building relationship skills, which are crucial, negotiating fairly, responsible decision making, acting ethically, respecting others. These are core skills we all need. If you have those, that's what makes the difference. And also it's quite interesting that this kind of emotional intelligence that from business and management they tell us, this is what makes the difference of people who have equal qualifications, but those who have this emotional intelligence they perform much better. So they are really quite important. We have some excellent examples of programs now that have been developed and implemented. And the research from across hundreds of these programs have been collated and put together. So I'm looking at reviews by Durlac from the US and Weir and Nend here in Europe. And they show that social and emotional learning programs, that they not only enhance social and emotional skills, they improve children's attitudes to school. They have better social behaviours, reduced aggression, and reduced emotional distress and risk for depression. So that is all very good. But very importantly, what they also have is that they impact on educational outcomes. And this is important for the educational sector. Children have an improved ability to learn and to achieve academically. And the children who receive social and emotional learning programs, that they improve up to 11 percentile points higher on standard achievement tests like reading, maths, the basics. So that's very important that it has that big impact on education. So essentially they give the skills that enhance the capacity for positive development. We also know that what matters in terms of these programs is that, yes, what is taught in the classroom matters, but also what is happening in terms of the whole school. You know, the policies within the school, how it links with the parents and the community. So we call this a whole school approach. You have to really embed these within the core mission of the school. And that is really when you get a big impact. You have to make sure that there is the capacity and the skills to implement these programs and that all of that is clear. So we're looking at the fact that we need organisational and system level practices to support this. Okay, I need to kind of move on, finish now, I think. Just very quickly, I haven't time to go into the detail of this, but I know one of your parallel streams is looking at harnessing the potential of online technologies. And I think we have a lot more work to do on this. This is the medium that young people use. So looking at the internet and social media as tools for mental health promotion and also as a virtual setting for promoting young people's mental health. We have been doing some work with Australia, who really are kind of leading the way, I think, in using online technologies with young people to promote life skills and competencies. And there is an emerging evidence base. It's not as strong, but it's beginning to be established. We reviewed the evidence for mental health promotion and prevention interventions, and there are some really good gaming programs, some mobile phone interventions, and some blogging and online support that are showing promising findings. We really need to harness this because this is where young people are at. One of the initiatives we did in Ireland was we did what we call bridging the digital disconnect, because people of my age and older are not as comfortable with this as the young people are, and parents are often concerned about everything negative that happens online. So it was about working with young people and parents about how that disconnect could be bridged, and so that it could be used much more effectively around digital literacy and mental health literacy. So just to finish off then, I think what I've said there is From the evidence, we can see that high-quality programs that work with parents, families and communities really do and can produce multiple and long-lasting positive benefits for children, their parents and society, and that the benefits are quite wide-ranging in terms of academic, social, employment and general well-being. What is important is that the effects are especially evident for the most vulnerable families from disadvantaged backgrounds, and that's very important. They're cost-effective, they're a solid social investment, and Martin Knapp and colleagues have really developed up a lot of evidence in Europe about the cost-effectiveness of mental health promotion interventions. So we have a robust case for action, so I think we have no excuses but to go out and do it. So it is a whole of government and a whole of society, so we need to put the systems and the structures in place, having the appropriate policies, build on the research, make sure we have good practitioners who can put all this into practice. And if we can get all of that working together, I think we can create the conditions for good mental health for all. So I leave you now with an image from, this is from the west of Ireland, from Achill Island. This morning I looked out my window and I saw the Baltic Sea, so here is an image of the Atlantic. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Margaret. Is there any questions? So.
Sylvia van der Heijkant from the Netherlands. Professor Barry, I just want to thank you for this really clear presentation and really great overview. My colleague and me, we are implementing the NFP in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. So for the last years, we are really busy with that. And we have comparable results, as you showed from Dr. Olds and their team. And it's really worthwhile to really have this in your country. Yeah. And really for that part of the women that don't do so well. And it has an amazing, amazing impact on the children and the future. So, and then to have that as a sustainable thing in your society, that's really great.
Great. Yeah.
Yes, so thank you
for that comment. Yeah.
Yes, and people who want to know more, session 2 this afternoon, the end of it, we will talk about how that is going in the Netherlands.
And we will also talk about our experience, because we are until now the only not English-speaking country in the whole world who is doing it. So we have the experience about cultural translation. There are now other countries, so also in Estonia. If you're interested, we can also help you how to do it. So everyone who wants to know anything about how to do it, come to visit our workshop and we will be there. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Barry.
Okay.